is Drumfunk. It's a version of Jungle and drum and bass with a focus on live sounding drum breaks which are heavily edited. Usually as accompanied by deep 808 or sine wave bass lines, eerie atmospherics, and jazzy samples. The drums here take the main focus, hence the name, and producers write the drums as if they were writing it as a melody. Artists that champion this sound include Paradox, Nebula, Dub One, Profane, Mac, John, Fanu, Equinox, my friend Zero, and even some early breakage. Some of the labels that push the sound include Scientific Wax, In Perspective Records, and Subtle Audio. So today I'm going to show you 10 tricks on how to write drum funk with a special focus on making the breaks. Even if you're not into drum funk, I recommend you guys to stick around during this video. I'll be showing you some essential tricks which you can use to create more interesting drum edits, whatever style you're into. By the way, my name is Stranger, and if you want to improve your music production and sound design, especially of drum and bass and dance music, this channel is for you. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to my channel to stay tuned for more content like this. Alright, without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, so first and foremost, we need some breaks. So I'm going to pull some samples from our sponsor in today's video, which is Tracklib. I have a collection of breaks, and this is a public collection. So if you sign up for Tracklib, you can find this collection. It's called Stranger's Breaks. So there's 2 breaks I want to sample. And first one is by a band called Damn, and this is an awesome break. It's got lots of rides and clangy hits as well as shuffles and drum fills, which is perfect because that gives us an assortment of little bits and pieces that we can chop it and rearrange in the drum funk style. So let's check out this break. So as you can hear, that's an awesome break. Also, I noticed with this track, they actually provide the multi-tracks. So if you want to sample the drums anywhere other than the intro, you can actually use the multi-track and sample the sections there. However, for this track, I like the drums right at the beginning. They're nice and clangy and crisp, and we'll just use that. So we're just going to download this track. All right, and the next track we're going to sample is by Leroy Conroy and Terry Cole. It's called Enter the Drums. And for this one, I like the rides at the beginning as well as the drum fills. This is also a really nice funk soul break with some really nice shuffles, which again is perfect for the style of drum funk. Having a lot of shuffles is really good for this style because that's what makes drum funk so interesting. It's all the intricate drum edits that we can do with the fills and shuffles. So with Tracklib, you can actually take just a section instead of the whole track. So if you click on the loop button at the very bottom, you can actually take, for example, an 8-bar loop, and you can specify where you want that loop to start. Let's say here. And it's usually pretty good for finding the start and the end point and looping it correctly. Sometimes I do find it's just a tiny bit off, which is why I choose 8 bars so it can get more than enough before and at the end of the start point. But having a smaller cut just makes it easier for editing later on. So loop button is very helpful, and then we can download the loop. Finally, we're going to use one more sample. This is kind of a jazz sample just to add some atmospherics and something musical to our drum funk piece. And we have this piece by Roberto Nicolosi. I just like how it sounds very mysterious. There's that dissonant pad at the beginning, which is perfect for drum funk. So we'll download that as well. And then we have some good samples to start our drum funk track. By the way, if you're interested in trying out Tracklib, you can use the link in my description. You'll receive 15 samples, which you can sample for free. For those that don't know, Tracklib is an online record store for sampling with a growing catalog of over 80,000 tracks and multi-tracks for sampling. The great thing about the content on TrackLib is that you can 100% clear the samples quickly and affordably. So if you're interested in trying out TrackLib, you can check my link in my bio. You'll receive 15 samples which you can use for free. So in today's exercise, I'm going to show you two methods of programming Drumfunk. One method is to chop it up in audio, and the other method is to program the breaks using MIDI. So for the Leroy break, I'm going to chop it as MIDI. So I've imported it into Recycle. What I've done is I've cut every single slice. It's a very meticulous process, and I like to be super precise when I'm cutting in Recycle. For example, here's this drum fill here. It just gives you a lot more control when you're re-importing this as MIDI. And another thing why I love Recycle is that there's this stretch function. So it adds a tail at the end of each slice. It makes it a lot more smoother if you want to play this at a slower tempo or if you want to pitch up the break. It's the old school method. This is how I've always done it, and it's always gotten me good results. Here's a slice without the stretch. And here it is with. Subtle, but you can hear that it trails out a bit. And then once you have it all saved, just save it as an RX2 file. All right, so I've imported the damn break as audio into Ableton. Now, the first part is to understand and get to know the groove of the break. So listen critically and analyze the different parts of the break. Listen for which hits have the best kick, which hits have the best snare. Listen for the shuffles. Listen for if there's an opportunity where if there's a ride on its own, that's very important to have singular rides when you're doing extended shuffles and sections where you just want to have a ride and no kick and snare, right? So listen to the break carefully. So what I've done is I've cut key sections of this break, which I can then use to rearrange and create my own rhythm. Now with Drumfunk, sometimes it sounds random, but I think it's a better approach to kind of have an overarching rhythm, whether it's boom, ka, or that boom, ka, boom, boom, ka, right? What you want is a general rhythm, and then you can fill the space with shuffles and fills to create that kind of really edited Drumfunk feel. But the first part is to find a groove first, right? Now, again, you want to listen to each slice to see which one has the best kick and snare and shuffles, right? Because each hit will sound different. And listen critically. For example, I always like to have a singular ride when, for example, when you don't want the kick and snare to play, having a ride is super important. So here's a perfect opportunity of a ride, and we can kind of create our own shuffle by taking this ride and then taking maybe a ghost snare. Now find the best ghost snare. That one's all right. This one's all right too. We can slide that over here. And then from here, we can maybe fix the transient points, make this start right at the transient. Same for this guy here. And then we can stretch this out. And there we go. Now we have our own shuffle, right? So you can hit Command J to create a new slice. I'm just going to color this green so I remember this is our own shuffle. You can listen to this. We can duplicate it. Right, so now we have a nice shuffle, and that can be used for extended fills and whatnot. So another part I really like is this little roll here. So we can use that as a theme. And there's little shuffles elsewhere in the track which are nice and handy as well. So we can use that and create a new sequence. So here's a trick you can use to cut up your break in audio. You can cut up all the main slices, and here I've named all the kicks and colored them in yellow. All the snares are green. The shuffles are orange. The ride cymbals are blue. I added this little ghost snare, also blue, because I can use the ride and ghost together to make a shuffle. So I colored them a common color, and then I have to fill in pink. So this helps you easily identify the different sections of the break, and then you can use each slice to create your own sequence. So for example, we can pull this guy down here, and then pull in the snare, or maybe we want to extend the shuffle here, so we bring the snare here. So let's make a little shuffle here. We'll take the ride. Actually, we'll take this ride here and this ghost here, right? Actually, we can join these together. And we can take this shuffle here, maybe do a triple. And then pull in a snare, maybe use this double kick, maybe this little interesting piece here, and then add the fill here. Then you have a sequence. So pretty much that's all you do. You can just mix and match and kind of experiment until you find a groove. So this is the new sequence I created, and you can see these shuffles that I created in green. So it's simply taking key slices and recreating my own rhythm. I'm going to add a bit of EQing to this break just to brighten up these cymbals and rides. That just makes it sound a little brighter. And then I'm going to really crush this break with some distortion using riff to make it sound a little more clangy. Now that's sounding like a Lemon D break. Now, one thing I forgot to mention is that actually I pitched this break up as well. So not to mention we're currently 170 beats per minute. The original tempo of this break is at 104 BPM. So normally it would sound like this without the EQing and without the distortion. And that actually sounds pretty tough at original tempo and pitch. But if we bump up the tempo to 170, then we have more of a Drumfunk feel. And then I pitched it up by 8 semitones. I just find that gives it more of that funk soul sound with a more high-pitched snare. And of course, with the EQing and distortion, it sounds like this. Of course, once it's sounding good, and then of course, then we just cut it up. All right, for the Leroy break, let's try cutting this up using MIDI. So find the RX2 file that we made in Recycle, and then right-click and slice to new MIDI track. Now I'm going to use my strange slicing preset because this gives us some macros to manipulate the break. If you want to grab the slicing preset, you can find it down in the link below. I'm just going to choose this and click OK. So here's the break, and when you import a recycled file, it also imports the MIDI, which is very handy. Now I'm just going to bump this up. I'm playing this at original tempo, but let's go back to 170. And then as you can see on the bottom left here, we have this pitch macro from the slicing preset. We can pitch this up by 3 semitones. Let's check it out now. Super funky break. Now you notice that some of the hits are not lined up. For example, this kick here should be land right on the first beat of the third bar here, but because this is a live drummer, things are not exactly on, and you might want things a little on. So this ride section, we're actually not going to use it for now. So we can take this section, and we know that this last hit should end at the end of the second bar. So we can highlight the entire section, all the hits, and use this little flag up here, and this time stretch it so now it's a little more on beat, right? Like that. Similarly, we can then bring this section here, drag this over on the very first beat, And then again, we can use this flag to get it to match a little more. So probably around there. And then I'm going to take this section, I'm going to crop it just so we have this section. Now, sometimes what I like to do is I like to fix the eighth notes. So this low ride is a bit off. So you can take this and the shuffle that comes with it and move it to the closest eighth note, right? Just to tighten up the breaks. So like that. So we can move these together. This shuffle I'll probably move on its own like that. This one here, can probably come closer. Just to get this break a little more tighter. And if you really want to be neat, you can fix all the ends of each note so they end properly at the end of the bar. However, it shouldn't matter with drum rack because it plays the, I believe it plays the slice through. Anyways, that should be good. Now, just like what we did with the audio, listen to the break carefully and look for key points of the break and which slices sound best. Like this snare sounds really good. Also this snare. There's a really nice roll here. Let's add some EQing just to brighten it up. Sounding much more fresher. And then with this pattern, you can resequence or create your own break. For example, I might want to remove this part and then create a new section. So actually, I think a cool section would be to add a little triplet section here. So we can take this little shuffle and turn on the triplet grid, right? So now this beat is split into 3 parts, and you can use this and add 3 repeated sections like that. That sounds quite funky. So play around the beat, kind of create your own rhythm. For example, we can mute this section and kind of create our own step here. Okay, and that's sounding fresh. So having 2 breaks is very helpful for Drumfunk because then you can do call and response and make some really interesting phrases. For example, we can play the Dan break for 4 bars and then switch to the Leroy break for another 4 bars. That's an easy 8-bar sequence. So make sure you have multiple breaks. The idea here is to really zone in and get some good phrases. So we have a strong 4-bar phrase using the Dan break, followed by another really strong 4-bar phrase of the Leroy break. So all in together, we have a really strong 8-bar sequence. And then once you have the 8-bar, then it's really easy to then make this a 16-bar by adding variation to the following sequence, right? And that's what you want to get, is to kind of get to longer sequences, ideally 16-bar sequences where there are subtle changes throughout the progression of that phrase. Another way you can think of it is in Drumfunk, the drums kind of take the main focus as opposed to other musical styles where the bass line or the lead takes the main focus. The drums are the focus. So the way you're writing drums in Drumfunk is kind of like you're writing it as if it was a melody. So it gets really crazy and wild. So the next step, I'm going to show you a number of techniques which you can use to really get crazy with editing and micro-editing your drum breaks to make it more quote-unquote musical. Essentially what you're doing is kind of creating a sentence or story with the drum break. The first technique is to find a section, sometimes at the end of the bar is a great spot, or at the very beginning, to add a stutter. So in this section, I've added a stutter by repeating the snare 4 times, and then I repeat the frequency, and then I increase the frequency for the remaining 8 hits like that. And that's a usual go-to trick coming from the old school days of Jungle, and now used in Drumfunk. Now, I especially like doing stutters and MIDI because you can get really tight and kind of get that kind of glitchy vibe, which is common in Drumfunk. So check out this one here where I get into, these are probably 64th notes, right? And that gives you a really interesting sound. Sometimes I call this Micro-Stutters. We can even take this one, make it even smaller. Like that. We can see how that sounds. Yeah, and that sounds pretty cool. Also, remember you can also use the triplets. So I'm in regular 4/4, but you can turn on the triplet grid, right? And then that gives you another layer of granularity. Another cool trick you can do is to reverse samples to kind of create an extended fill. For example, we have this green fill here with the rides, and what we can do is take out the ghost hits and focus in on the rides. We can take this ride, duplicate it, take this section, and then click on this button to reverse it. So now we have the normal ride followed by the reverse ride. And it's awesome when you then just duplicate it all the way. So now you have this extended fill here with the ride and reverse ride. And that gives you a good vibe. Another way you can use this is doing the same thing with snares. For example, this snare here, we can duplicate it and again, reverse it. So now you have an extended kind of snare that swoops in. Again, dope vibes. The next trick is using filter sweeps. Most common is low pass filter sweeps. So I have this section where I duplicated the kick 4 times. And this is an opportune section to kind of create a filter sweep. So I'm using auto filter and I'm simply automating the frequency and resonance. So turning on the automation mode, if you show the filter, it's actually going from low to high during this 4 kick section. Now I find that when you have the cutoff low, you want the resonance up a bit. So if you click on the resonance, you'll see that my resonance starts high and then goes back down to 0. I just find that when the filters opens back up, you usually want the resonance back to 0 because it might make the high end really squeaky, or it might just add something to the high end which you may not want. So just make sure your resonance is back to 0 when you open the filter all the way back up. So again, here's the filter, low to high, and the resonance high to low. The resonance starts at around 55% and back down to 0. The cutoff starts at 119 hertz and back to full. So again, this is how it sounds. Just gives you the kind of that metalheads feel, Dillinger vibes. Here's a really cool trick that I learned recently by studying the Drumfunk greats. You can take a shuffle section or a drum fill section and resequence it into the triplet grid. So here I have the normal grid, and here's the shuffle at the end of the Leroy break. And then let's turn on the triplet grid. Let's decrease the intensity. Let's bring it down to around there. So taking this fill section, we can resequence it using the triplet. So moving this here, maybe this one here like that. Maybe we don't need this kick, right? So now it's sequenced to the triplet grid. You can click legato just to fix the ends of the notes. Let's check it out here. It's an interesting vibe. Similarly, we can resequence drum fills and audio to the triplet grid. For example, here's this fill here. You can take this one out, and I've taken this fill and chopped up the 4 notes. And then turn on the triplet grid, decrease the frequency, and then we can move the hits over. Maybe double up certain notes if you like this one, like that. And now you have this. Hear it in context. It's just an interesting vibe. You may want to fix the ends of the notes since there's gaps. Just adding some fades. That'll make it sound a bit smoother. Another common trick is to use pitch bending. So if you're doing audio, just go into the envelope section, go into clip and choose transpose. You can see here during this green fill section, I've pitch bend from 0 to 3 semitones. And now we have this. Here, I'll play it without it. And then with. And that adds another interesting vibe. Here's pitch bending using MIDI. Again, just choose the envelope section. Just make sure you're under the MIDI control section on the first drop down and choose pitch bend. I've drawn this pitch bend here from 0 to max, and I've added it to the little triplet fill section we did earlier. Interesting vibe. We may have touched upon this earlier, but remember to use extended fills. It just adds a really interesting groove when the listener kind of expects a snare to come in, but you extend that shuffle. And that's why having those shuffles and low fills are important. The next trick is using time stretching. So another way to kind of extend a fill, so when a listener is expecting a kick and snare, you don't give it to them right away. So here's a section here. And we'll just remove all the hits here, and we have a snare here. And then hold shift and hover the mouse at the very end of the clip here. You can click and drag, and that time stretches the slice. Now, if you double click the slice, you can use different algorithms. It will give you a different feel. I'm currently using Complex Pro, but you can use beats or tones. And tones, you can change the grain size. Texture is also nice, also has grain size. I believe Dillinger uses a trick like this in Ja Know You Big. Kind of makes it sound like a stutter. So it's really up to you how you want to do your time stretch, but there's multiple algorithms. It's here in context. So use time stretching wisely. The next trick, and I use this trick sparsely, is panning. So a cool trick you can do is to pan different slices to give a stronger stutter effect. So for example, here's this drum fill section, which I did in the triplet mode. And then you can turn on the automation mode, go into mixer, and choose panning. And what I've done is I panned first slice on the left, the next slice on the right, and then it alternates. So when you hear this fill, it goes from left to right. And you can hear this in context. Okay. And it just gives you a nice effect. I just use it maybe once or twice in a track. I don't want to overdo it, but it just gives another dimension to your editing. Cool trick. Finally, once you've mastered all these individual tricks, you can then combine tricks. So for example, you might have a stutter to a micro-stutter, and you might want to pitch bend that, or you might want to add a low-pass filter sweep to your stutter. Just like how I did here. It just makes your editing a little more complex. Or you can add pitch bending to your stutters as well, as we showed earlier, like this one. Or imagine your time stretching, adding some pitching or filtering to your time stretch snare. So I think the possibilities are pretty much endless here. It's up to your creativity and what you can come up with. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I showed you a number of tricks that you can use for drum editing, for Drumfunk. Even if you're not into Drumfunk, I think these techniques are useful if you want to add some funky edits at the end of your drum phrases. I think these are universal techniques which you can add to your own style. Now today's video is more focused on the drums of Drumfunk, but once you have the drums down, you might wonder where to take it next. So usually Drumfunk is accompanied by deep sub bass, whether that's an 808 or sine wave bass. So I have this 808 pattern here playing along the drums. And if you want to get away from the 4-bar loop, you can duplicate it and perhaps add some or double up some notes. For example, this A here could be doubled up. Just minimal variations to keep it interesting. Other common sounds used in Drumfunk are atonal atmospheric sounds or dissonant pads and other sounds like that. So an omnisphere is great for that. There's a selection of atonal and dissonant pads you can use. I'm using this bending light preset and it's simply playing one note. And finally, here's that jazz sample I took from Tracklib by Roberto Nicolisi. I've taken this little dissonant pad section, added some echo. And here's that saxophone section. Very cool and mysterious vibes, which is perfect for Drumfunk. Alright, now that you've seen all the tricks I use in creating Drumfunk, let's put it all together and check out the full track. Oh yeah, we got some Drumfunk vibes. Someone call Equinox for me. Alright, hope you enjoyed watching my process on writing Drumfunk drum and bass music. The key here is to come up with the main groove or rhythm first. And then once you have that groove established, you can then start editing it and filling it with drum fills, stutters, shuffles, and effects. Remember to use some deep sub basses. Now, I've only shown you about 32 bars of the music. Obviously, if you were to arrange and develop this track, you would have to do a little more editing and then prolong the arrangement. But hopefully you get the gist of it and you can use these techniques in your writing. Even if you're not into Drumfunk, I think there's some techniques here that you can apply to your own writing style. So, for example, some of the editing techniques can be used to create interesting drum fills in other styles. You might want to add an interesting drum fill at the end of a 16-bar loop, whether that's a drum and bass track or a trap banger. Having little edits in your drum groove is what makes your track interesting. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Once again, if you like it, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. And if you're interested in trying out Tracklib, remember you can use my link down in the description. You'll receive 15 tracks, which you can sample for free. Also, there's my breaks library, which you can check out at Tracklib. Also, if you want to support my channel, I have some sample and preset packs and Ableton kits. You can check that out down in the links below. If you want to learn more breakbeat and aiming editing tricks, you can check this video up here. And also, if you want to learn how to make modern breaks, you can check out this video up here. Anyways, that's pretty much it for today, guys. Thanks for watching, keep practicing, and I'll see you at the next video.